We're at part 3 now, page 44, and we're in chemistry, biochemistry. At this point, we're in biochemistry, and we're dealing with one of the 4 major categories of biochemistry, which is the carbohydrates. There's carbohydrates, there's proteins, there are lipids or triglycerides, and there are nucleic acids. Those are the 4 general categories in biochemistry of life molecules. Okay, over here we're looking at the simple sugars that are contributing to nucleic acids. Deoxyribose and ribose form part of the backbone of the DNA and RNA. We talked about sucrose, table sugar. We talked about maltose, which is the joining together of 2 glucose molecules and is usually derived from a carbohydrate, and then we have lactose, which is the disaccharide of milk sugars. Okay, so then we consider this idea here, which is a carbohydrate in the how shall I say, polymerized state, and so here we have a polysaccharide, it's referred to as, and it means that we've put together many different glucose molecules, and if it's in an animal species, namely the human species, our way of putting together a polysaccharide is in the form of glycogen. Okay, it's much simpler than carbohydrates found in plants, and we are able to actually rescue the glucose molecules much more readily. So each of these little green hexagons here would be referenced as a glucose. And this is, as I've noted here, stored in liver tissue for the whole body. It's also stored in all muscle tissue for use within the muscles. And so we can deliver individual glucose molecules from the glycogen within muscles. So muscles that have to endure periods of energetic movement are able to store glucose as glycogen. So this is the first thing we store, actually, when we begin to have adequate calories of food. After we have used glucose for our immediate needs, we begin to store enough glycogen for the energy of one day. And that's a topic that we'll have to discuss further in later chapters. How does the body know that that one day of glycogen is a certain amount of glycogen? And it's based on what we've done really for the past 6 to 8 weeks in terms of energetic output. So if we've been a couch potato, we don't store much glycogen. But if we've been an aerobic athlete of the marathon persuasion, then we store lots of glycogen. It turns out the kidney stores glycogen for its own needs. The liver does so for the needs of the whole body, and in particular the brain. Okay, so as you can see here, they've actually depicted here in a much more slightly Fisher diagram, or a way of showing us how the glucose molecules are connected to one another, and it's very simple. Okay, then we come over and we take a look at lipids or triglycerides. This is a triglyceride here. We're showing it actually in its parts. Here is a glycerol molecule. It's an alcohol, a 3-carbon alcohol. And over here we have the 3 fatty acids which attach here and create then what is a triglyceride. Okay? And so when we say fatty acid, this is actually the moiety right here, a C double bond O and a CO. This is the alpha carbon of a long chain of carbons, the alpha and the beta carbon. Okay, and so this is a completely, since it's only one single bond here, and these are all double hydrogens, this is considered a hydrogenated type of fatty acid. Okay, over here we have it all hooked up together, and here's the alpha carbon, here's the beta carbon. whenever we metabolize a fatty acid, we have to separate it, and then we do something called beta oxidation, where we take 2 carbons at a time, we make acetyl-CoA, and then we enter the Krebs cycle. We'll talk about that in our metabolism chapter. Okay, this is the alpha carbon over here, the last carbon in the chain. These chains are often anywhere from 10 to maybe 16 or more carbons long, usually an even number, because where everything happens in pairs, alpha beta kind of thing. The last one is the omega, and if we count back 3, 1, 2, 3, and we have a double bond, we have an omega-3 fatty acid. If we have to count back 6 from the omega, we have an omega-6 fatty acid. Our brain is composed of almost 1/3 omega-3 fatty acids, so we need a lot of omega-3 to make up a human body, and it's an essential nutrient. We cannot make it in our own body. We have to get it from outside. And where do we get it from? We actually get it from membranes. The membranes of green leafy vegetables is where we get it from. We could get it from fish, but fish are in the same situation that we're in. Fish don't know how to make omega-3, even though they have a lot of it, because they're actually quite, how shall I say, naturally intelligent. Take a look here. We have 1, 2, 3, double bond. So that's omega-3. They forgot to write that there, so I wrote it so that you know it. If we had to go all the way back to 6 carbons, that would be an omega-6. So you would be liking to have omega-3. You can't get too much. People worry, oh, what if I have, salmon, for instance, are 21-to-1, omega-3 to omega-6, as is seaweed. It turns out that salmon actually eat other fish or other nutrients from the sea. All fish do. And starting from algae, we have lots of omega-3 in plant life. So plants are the only things, the only species, shall I say, that know how to make omega-3. So ultimately, we could go straight to the plants and get our omega-3. We don't have to necessarily go through fish to do that. Here we have an interesting molecule that actually lives between the fatty acid tails of membranes. This is a phospholipid, and we're going to be having lots of membranes in the future that we're going to be looking at. So one part of the membrane is polar. The other part is the fatty acid tails that stick down into the membrane. We have another phospholipid facing it. And so this is the central part of a membrane. And in between those two parts, in between the fatty acid tails and the next phospholipid is going to be this molecule, which, as you can see here, is a kind of a steroid. It's actually cholesterol. All steroids, whether it's testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, or vitamin D, or cortisol, are going to be predicated on this molecule, which is cholesterol. Cholesterol is the base molecule for this. Okay, and so we'll come back to this and then